economist and a developer walk into a bar and take a seat. And immediately they just start discussing who has the easiest job. And the economist turns to the teacher and he goes, "You obviously have the easiest job. You play with kids all day and get summers off." Now, the teacher, looking rightly offended, disagrees, says, "There's no way I have the easiest job. Clearly, economists have the easiest job. You just pull predictions out of thin air and it doesn't even matter if they're wrong." The economist takes a deep breath as if about to launch into a rebuttal, but instead just looks at the developer. "What?" cries the developer. "Don't look at me. Why, just today I wrote a bunch of code, fully unit tested. Then I had a planning meeting for the next program increment. Have you ever heard of that? That's basically predicting the future, and management take it way too seriously. So I work all summer, I'm forced to predict the future, and I suffer the consequences if I'm wrong." "Yeah," says the economist, "but your office has a ping pong table, right?" So, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for choosing to attend my session. My name is Adele, and I am a software engineer at Trifork, Amsterdam. And there's no doubt that as software professionals, we do have a uniquely demanding job. It goes so far beyond what we are taught in the average computer science degree. You know, there are all these other activities that we are expected to participate in order to do our jobs well. So, just quickly, who in this room has a computer science degree? Yeah, not everyone. Quite a few hands going up, but not all of you. And I can assume that some of you with your hands down don't have a CS degree. Is that right? Am I seeing any nods? We're a full house of... No, we've got a couple. Great. So it is nice to know that I am not the only one here. So we do have a little bit of variety in this audience, which is great. Maybe not as much as some other audiences, but this is what I do love to see. So my study background is in civil engineering and economics. That's why I do feel comfortable with the term software engineer, even though I only opened up Terminal 5 years ago. I have also spent some time working in marketing and sales, and these experiences from different areas is where the idea for this talk came from. So I just found myself thinking a little bit differently than my colleagues, especially my early days as a developer. Now, of course, I had mega imposter syndrome days back then, and I still do, but I learned pretty quickly to leverage what I did know rather than beating myself up for not knowing what others knew. So that's where the idea for this talk came from. It's a mix of my personal experience and interests, as well as some professions that I wanted to learn more about. And I'm going to share these findings with you through storytelling because I know conference life is hard and the afternoon dip is starting to hit and our brains can only take so much fact dumping at once. So sit back and relax and hopefully you do learn something. So the stories you're about to hear center around a team, some issues they face and how they work through them. And the team is loosely based on my team at Trifork, only the names, characters, locations, and events are different. So in the newly formed team, we have the tech lead, Malcolm, the project manager, RJ, and some devs. And being a project-based consultancy, the PO and domain expert is the main contact at the customer. The team have been assembled to improve the relationship with the customer and transition away from being a feature factory to being a true technology partner. And the team has inherited a large and aging Java project. And the project could be described as somewhat less than joyful to work on. Now, most of the devs are far from excited for this project to represent their current reality. Immediately, one of the devs starts to feel overwhelmed and starts complaining to Malcolm, one of the most patient and level-headed people you could ever meet. "Malcolm," exclaims junior dev Lika, "it's taken me 3 days to set up my environment just to work on this project. The main applications are finally building, but it takes over 15 minutes. The code base is hard to navigate, technical debt is off the charts, and the documentation sucks. How on earth are we supposed to work like this? We need to start rebuilding this ASAP, get out of the 2010s and into the 2020s. Malcolm responds calmly, "Lika, you were right. This is a tough project, and clearly the priorities of the previous team weren't the same as ours. Let's spend some time pairing and promote this practice within the team. This should help us optimize our workflow, and we can create tickets as we go. Although Malcolm had helped Lika's anxiety levels to drop, she was not convinced of the approach. The only way she can see out is a rewrite. So over lunch, she brings up the topic with RJ. RJ listens intently, and by the time Lika has finished monologuing, RJ's lunch is gone while Lika's has barely been touched. Lika, he says, have you ever heard of opportunity cost? Lika shakes her head. Opportunity costs occur whenever there is a trade-off between two options. It's the cost of the options or opportunities that you give up when you make a decision in terms of other goods and services. Yeah, what? Lika looks as lost as a back-end developer at a UX conference. So let's think about what you're proposing. It looks like we have two options. Keep working on this old project, accepting lower developer joy and velocity for the foreseeable period, or rewrite the damn thing. Do you agree? Yes, replies Lika. Okay, so what do you think it would cost to rebuild the worst parts of the project? So the core service and the reporting service. Lika goes into full estimation mode. Oh, so rough estimate, it would take 3 developers 12 months, call it 2,100 hours, based on my rate, that's 200K, but we're probably doing some senior dev time, so let's make it 250K. Okay, 250K, replies RJ. Is that everything? Yeah, replies Lika. And I guess we have to convince the customer that it's a good idea. Okay, replies RJ. Now let me ask you, given the current velocity of the team, what's the value to the customer of the features that we could deliver in those 12 months? Lika shrugs her shoulders. I have no idea. It would be much more than 250K, replies RJ. Ah, replies Lika. She sees where RJ is coming from. But wait, she says, surely our faster velocity will make up for it. Okay, how much faster do you think we can be after the rebuild? We can double our velocity, says Lika confidently. So RJ starts scribbling on a napkin. He goes, so assuming your estimate is accurate, we produce nothing for 1 year and then twice as much the next year as the year before the rewrite. Yes. And so then at the end of year 2, we are at the same position as where we started. And at the end of year 3, we have done 1.3 times the work we otherwise would have. And at the end of year 4, we're at 1.5 times. And that's assuming that the velocity on the rebuild does not drop at all. Lika starts to see RJ's point. RJ continues, I've worked with Malcolm for a very long time. I know what we can do with the right team. There is no way that we'll finish the year with the same velocity as we have now. We can do this. Now, this is admittedly a very simplistic explanation of opportunity costs, but in this case, it was all RJ needed to get the buy-in from Lika. So we can summarize it as the cost to do the thing plus the cost of not doing a different thing. So let's explore this a little bit further and go through some choices that we might encounter as developers and the factors that we need to consider as it relates to opportunity costs. So with Lika and RJ, we saw the rewrite versus improve decision. And here are some other decisions. So with respect to internal tooling, libraries and frameworks, we have the direct cost to run, build and maintain. So for example, salaries and hosting. But what about other costs like the learning curve for new developers or the willingness of those developers to work at a company with custom internal tooling? Because it's not just the company that assumes the cost. The employee has a cost as well. Could result in what I've called junk professional development, and that's learning with low transference to future positions. So, for example, learning to use a custom framework instead of something more ubiquitous like Spring. We also have the choice between custom and SaaS. And has anyone here heard of Wardley mapping? Yeah, a few of you. So he has this brilliant method of mapping drivers of value along a continuum from brand new to commodity. And the more of a commodity something is, the better it is to buy or to rent it than to build it yourself. So computing used to be a value add, for example, and now it's a commodity. And essentially it boils down to, is the thing we want to build, is it our core business, our competitive advantage, the thing that separates us from the competition? And if the answer is no, then you need to reach for the ass. And by the way, that is the only time you should reach for the ass after hearing no. So, I'll give him a minute. Build versus buy is a discussion we often have with our customers and potential customers at Trifork. We build custom enterprise solutions, so the discussion of why should we hire you or buy off the shelf comes up a lot. And guiding them through this is basically a question of, is this your core business? And we do this not only to keep our customer happy and to keep our integrity intact, but also because we just don't want to build something that already exists. So next up, we have learning and development. And the opportunity cost of becoming an expert is reducing the number of areas where you know things. And on the flip side, the opportunity cost of knowing a little about a lot is a high level of expertise in one area. So meetings, as we know all too well, also have an opportunity cost, because the cost of keeping everybody on the same page is interrupting employee workflow. And in the case of maintenance versus development, the classic example of taking on technical debt to go fast now, and accepting a poorer implementation and higher chance of bugs to get software in the hands of users now. So let's rejoin RJ, Malcolm, and Lika, but not from where we left them. We are going to join them in an alternate reality, one where RJ does not understand opportunity cost and where Lika gets her way. And the team decides to rewrite the core service and the reporting service. This is going to be a big bang replacement. The customer agrees that the rewrite is the best move. However, a year is far too long, and they set a hard deadline of 3 months. So with classical mythical man-month logic, RJ throws 12 developers on the project, and this is how you know that we're in an alternate reality. RJ happens to have a spare 12 developers to throw on a project at a moment's notice. We may be getting a little bit closer there in the last year, but it still holds. Anyway, other than an oversupply of developers and Lika getting her way, this reality is the same as the original one. So what happens next is very predictable. The end of month 3 rolls around, nothing has been delivered. Despite this, the team are heavily invested in the project and ask for more time and resources. RJ doesn't want to look like a fool, and neither does the customer. So not only is the project extended for another 3 months, another 6 developers are added. And at the end of those 3 months, the project is still not complete. However, the commitment of the original project sponsors remains as strong as ever. Developers are complaining about rework and changing unclear requirements, but it's fine because we're in the reality where developers are very easy to find. Besides, they've come so far that it would be a waste to abandon all of the work that the team have already done. And sure enough, the project gets extended for another 6 months. Finally, at month 10 of the now 12-month project, the board gets involved and they are livid. The project is costing 5 times the original estimate and taking 4 times as long. How on this alternate earth did we get here? So can you help the board out? Does anyone have any ideas of what's happening here? Sorry? Sorry? So it's the sunk cost fallacy. So the sunk cost fallacy is the tendency to continue an endeavor once an investment in money, effort, or time has been made. In other words, the tendency to throw good money after bad. So let's give up is actually the solution. So at month 3 and month 6, there are signs that the project is doomed, and the most rational thing to do would be to shut down the project. But the money already spent is a sunk cost. There is no way to recover it. But giving up feels like a waste. Even the word giving up has a connotation to it. So RJ and the team, they press on. And at the beginning of a project or when deciding on the best approach, we're actually often less emotionally attached to any particular course of action. And it's easier to think through the consequences and the opportunity costs of our decisions. But as more work is done, more emotional attachment to the project tends to increase, and the emotions get in the way of our decision making. And this leads us to continue devoting resources to a failing course of action. And in management and psychology, they use the term escalation of commitment to describe this. And if I'm honest, even though I come from an economics background, I actually prefer the term economics escalation of commitment and the reasoning around it. So research shows that economic study and awareness of sunk costs as a concept doesn't actually improve our ability to cut our losses and move on. And with my n=1 example, I have studied economics and I still find this a very difficult thing to do rationally, like sunk cost. However, when we accept that we are flawed humans with emotional brains and we make a habit of questioning our decisions, then we can actually take steps to making more balanced decisions. And if you look at any large or expensive failure, whether it be software development, war, or a business going under, you will often find an escalation of commitment. So let's go for a change of scenery now. Let's shift from the conference room to the weight room, to the gym. So about 2 years ago, I started a weight loss journey, again, and I like to blame the pandemic and a lack of activity related to that for my weight gain. But in reality, I had been making poor choices for longer than that. And I had tried and failed to regain control by seeking diet and exercise perfection. My definition of it anyway. And it would work for a few weeks, but before long, I'd have a moment of weakness, break my food and exercise rules, and give up. So eventually I decided that enough was enough and that I needed help. So I hired a personal trainer and a coach. So what do you think the first thing we started working on was? So hands up if you think diet. Okay, so you can read ahead so you can decide. All right, lifting technique. All right, exercises that burn the most calories. So if you kept your hand down, you're actually right, because it was none of these. Although an honourable mention does go to diet. Diet was the second lesson, but the first lesson was around habits. And specifically, forging good habits rather than striving for a perfect result. Consistency over perfection. And any trainer or coach worth hiring understands this concept at a fundamental level, and they live by it. Not every workout is a perfect workout, and not every meal is a perfect meal. Striving for that will just burn you out and increase the chances that you will give up and revert to old habits. So consistency over perfection, a very nice point. What does that mean in the context of software development? Well, you can actually see this in the principles behind the Agile Manifesto. Hands up if you've actually read the Agile Manifesto. Not bad. I think, what, half? 60% maybe? So those of you who haven't, hands up if you think it mentions the word Scrum. Wow, good marks. So a lot of people do believe that the word Scrum is in the Agile Manifesto. And in lifting, we refer to this as bro science, which is where stories get passed around the gym, usually about the best way to make gains. And what happens is it becomes a kind of folklore, which doesn't really capture the essence of the original idea. And once it gets accepted as truth, it's very hard to change people's minds. So anyway, Scrum is Agile bro science. And there are two principles behind the Agile Manifesto that I'd like to remind you of. So the first principle that I would like to share is our highest priority is to satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery of valuable software. The second one is deliver working software frequently from a couple of weeks to a couple of months with the preference for the shorter time scale. Consistency over perfection. So consistency, working software in users' hands as quickly as possible. Respond to feedback with small changes, repeat. Perfection. The pursuit of perfection can lead us further away from our goals to situations of scope creep, over-engineering, or designing for a future that never comes. Some of the worst culprits of this are premature scalability or greenfield microservices when you only have a team of 6. Or embarking on a rewrite simply to scratch your nerd itch of working with the latest technologies. But by being consistent with good habits and finding something enjoyable in the process, you can achieve more than you think. And in the words of Agile Manifesto signer Kent Beck, I'm not a great programmer, I'm just a good programmer with great habits. Now, some of you might disagree with Kent's humble self-esteem. I'm going to pose. And the reason is because most of my photos from conferences come out. So, all right, give me that 1 second, all right? So you might disagree with Kent's humble self-assessment, but whether you agree or not, the message is worth listening to. Our success or lack thereof is a product of our habits, which leads to the next question. How do we form great habits? Anyone who's tried to make a lifestyle change can tell you it is hard, but striving for consistency over perfection can take you a hell of a long way. So we're going to go back to RJ, Lika and the team in their original reality, the one where Lika thankfully doesn't get her way, and the team decide to improve what they've got rather than doing a rewrite. And the one where Malcolm is the world's most jacked tech lead. He's also read the book Atomic Habits by James Clear, an MIT researcher. So let's go back to that first conversation that Malcolm and Lika had. What were the biggest grievances that Lika had with the project? Slow build, tech debt, sucky documentation. And the day after this conversation, Malcolm and Lika sit down and they analyse the project together. They review the SonarQube output, which they use as a measure of technical debt. And remember, we aren't going for perfection here, and that also includes the choice of tooling. So They get the following output, and the score is 97 bugs, 7 vulnerabilities, and 1987 code smells. See, tech debt off the charts. How do we even begin? Lika is clearly overwhelmed. Unfazed, Malcolm replies, by taking small steps. Malcolm calls the rest of the team over and he takes them through the habit-forming template that his PT used with him when he decided to get jacked. So, step 1, start small and be specific. So the easiest way to do that is to add a small behavior with a measurable outcome to an existing behavior. So what's something that we do regularly that we could build a helpful habit into? So in the case of Malcolm and the team, they decide that with every merge request or completed user story, they will remove at least 5 code smells or 1 bug. Step 2 is to find joy in the process, or to at least find a way to make the process more tolerable. So many housekeeping type goals, like reducing tech debt, they're not glamorous, they can even be pure tedium. But it's important that you find something that works for you. So, for example, I find that embedding the housekeeping work in a feature ticket, the way the team are doing here, that's enough for me. I like to know that I left things better than the way that I found them. And that applies to code that I review as well. Another one I like is if I can add in a feature with a net reduction in lines of code. That one's one of my favorites. But reward and joy can also be other things like going for a walk, taking a ping pong break between tedious tasks, like whatever you need, it's up to you to figure it out. The next and most important step is recognizing that you will slip up occasionally. That is normal. You're a human. The key point is that you get back on track quickly. So, for example, if you find yourself in a rush at the end of the sprint, you just jam a feature in, that's okay. Just pick up the thread on the next story. But it comes with a small but large caveat, which is to make sure that you do pick up the thread. Because if you slip twice, the habit is less likely to stick, and you risk ending up with a code base full of band-aids and duct tape. Step 4 is not really a step, it's more of a reminder, and it's important to be patient and honest with yourself and also with each other. So it might be that you enter a period where bug reports or smells are going up again. You can discuss what's happening with your team in the retro and make a plan. In my team, we've actually had times where we realize that we're just short on data to decide the best path forward, which is when we'll talk about ways to improve this. At different times, we've added extra logging, updated our dashboards, created extra load test scenarios. We've compared how many bugs have found their way into acceptance and production in the current period versus the previous period. And even actions like knowledge sharing sessions have helped so that more people know the complex and error-prone parts of the app and how they work. This is also a nice opportunity for different people to provide insights on the problem that the team are seeing. But it's important to appreciate that not every hiccup will require a change of plan. You know, what could be needed is just adhering to the original plan a little bit better. And this is why it's really important for your retros to be a safe space, free from blame, but with space for accountability. So you can be truthful about where things are going wrong and take steps to make things better, rather than trying to push the problem outwards. So for example, by blaming another team, indecisive stakeholders, or a burdensome business process. And lastly, it's important to reflect on your progress, to see how far you've come and to reward yourself. So, for example, how much has the quality report improved over the last 6 months? Is velocity starting to increase, if only just a little bit? Is the code review process faster and more effective? Is the project simply more joyful to work on? Set a date to evaluate your progress, and in the meantime, you can think up some reward ideas. In our team, we like to celebrate our milestones, even the maintenance ones. So getting all of our customers on the newest version of the product or migrating the database to reduce our tech stack. So when I first came up with the idea for this talk, I naturally thought of the professions where I had experience or where people close to me had experience. I didn't want to give you a talk that could have been a Google search or a response from ChatGPT. And I actually come from a long line of teachers, about 25 of them in my extended family. Yes, my extended Catholic family. My grandmother was one of 12, and my mother's one of 7. So with that field to play in, I was sure that I'd uncover some great conventional teaching wisdom. I was so confident I even put it in the title when this talk was just that and an abstract. I thought the insight would be something along the lines of every child is unique, which would translate very nicely into every project is unique or every team is unique. But as I got to work and I started collecting everyone's input, I found myself getting pushed in a different direction. Overwhelmingly, the following theme kept coming up: relationships first. Now, call me oblivious, but it's not really the first thing that I think of when I think of teachers. Overworked and underpaid spring to mind. Underappreciated is another. But when I really thought about it, I realized that even though my family is huge, my mum still has updates for me every time I call her. Cousin Barry is up to this, Cousin Yoli's up to that. They even have a family reunion every few years. Family members flying in from all over Australia simply to catch up with each other. And this is a properly organised reunion with invitations, venue, catering. There's even entertainment there, the entertainment, but still, I am convinced that at least part of the reason they stay so connected is because of all the teachers actively making an effort to keep everyone in the loop. A living, breathing example of relationships first. Successful teachers maintain a web of relationships with people who all have different needs. The rationale being that if you can't connect with them, then you can't teach them. And this extends beyond the student. For example, to the students' families, other teachers, school administrators, the education department, the list goes on. So it becomes that if you can't connect with them, then you can't rely on them, ask a favour of them, do your best work with them, trust them, take risks with them. So put your hand up if you're an extrovert. All right, first poll, that was predictable. So not too many hands. So believe it or not, despite the fact that on this stage I actually am a big introvert, building relationships does not come naturally to me. I have to make a conscious effort and I don't always get it right. For example, sometimes it takes months before I have a proper conversation with the new starters at my office. It's like 1 to 2 people a month, but I always have a backlog. So to let you on a little secret, one of the reasons that I like speaking at conferences is because it gives people an excuse to come up and talk to me. This means I don't have to awkwardly initiate the conversation because, trust me, it would be awkward. And yes, that is a shameless request for you to come up to me and say hello during the conference over the next few days. So one day at lunch, Lika is chatting with a developer from another project, Yoast. And even though they see each other nearly every day in passing, this is the first time that they've actually had a proper conversation. And they start discussing their projects, and it doesn't take long until Yoast starts complaining that his project needs a rewrite. Lika can't help but let out a little giggle. "What are you laughing at?" says Yoast, feeling a little judged. "I'm sorry, Yoast. It just sounds exactly like me from a few months ago when I joined my current team. what we decided to do instead was work at consistently reducing our tech debt. At first, it seemed really overwhelming, but we've actually made some really good progress. Joost is intrigued. Deep down, he knows that a rewrite would probably fail. He's just really frustrated. Would you mind sharing your approach with my team? Actually, you know what? I know that some of the other teams are having issues caused by tech debt, and I know they would love some tips on how to reduce it. Would you be open to running a lunchtime session for us? Lika looks hesitant. Look, it doesn't have to be too formal, reassures Joost. Just, give a lightning talk and then we'll break off into some smaller discussion groups. Plus, he added, I know you're a big introvert like me. This would be a nice way to get to know more people at the company. I'm sick of having to make awkward conversation at the coffee machine. I have nothing to say about the weather. The next week, Lika and Joost run the session. Lika's presentation goes well and kickstarts some great conversations. One of the attendees mentions that in addition to the SonarQube plugin, they're making use of a couple of other useful plugins. And Lika's head is now full of ideas, which she takes back to her team to implement. And within a week, one of the session attendees approaches Lika to ask about how they could run their own session. Lika and Joost have started something good. So what Lika and Joost have set in motion is the formation of communities of practice, or guilds. And this is where members with a common interest interact regularly to share information, improve their skills, and actively work on advancing the general knowledge of the domain of interest. Communities of practice are organic, self-directed, and are a great example of putting relationships first, just like my family reunions. However, unlike my family reunions, the entertainment features robust conversation rather than Uncle Fred's robust Cher impersonation. So, several months have passed and the team has made some good progress in reducing their technical debt. Malcolm brings in a small gift for each member of the team. More importantly, especially for Lika, is that working on the project is becoming more joyful every day. The team are in the middle of opening their gifts when RJ notices the dashboard on the big screen. What's happening here? He wonders out loud. The team stop what they are doing and they huddle around the dashboard. The disk of one of the core service machines is nearly full. Malcolm takes a closer look at the machine. The culprit is a very large and expanding log file. Lika opens up the client for the message broker. One of the queues seems to be blocked. It has a large number of messages in the queue and the number is growing. Overall response times in the app are still okay and only a small number of users are impacted, and the team want to keep it that way. Marta, one of the team's devs, draws 4 columns on the whiteboard and labels them A, N, C, A. ANCA is a concept that Marta picked up while completing her private pilot's license. It resonated with her so much that she introduced it to the team. After some discussion of its merits and its applicability, the team decided to use it as their framework for dealing with production issues. Aviate, navigate, communicate, administrate. Aviate. In other words, fly the aircraft first. When there are competing priorities in the cockpit, it's all too easy to become fixated on one particular issue. For example, a specific alarm, instruction, or warning. Aviate reminds the pilots of their number one priority, which is to keep the damn plane in the air. Navigate. So the plane is still in the air. The passengers are delightfully unaware that you are not just sipping coffee and reading the newspaper. So what is your current position and where are you going? Can you verify visually where you are? Is the original destination airport still the best option to go, given where you are and how you're going now? So stay on course until you and your co-pilot decide on a course of action. Oh yeah, and keep flying the plane. So communicate. Should you alert air traffic control about what's happening? What about the cabin crew? You be clear with your communication in the cockpit. Acknowledge your co-pilot and repeat any decisions back so that they can confirm. Administrate. This is a newer addition to the model and it's often overlooked. It's the tasks that enable you to do your other tasks well, and it may inform your decisions. So in the cockpit, this could mean calculating the estimated time of arrival or how much fuel is remaining. After a safe landing, it could include logging and an incident report. So back at the whiteboard, the team consider the first column, aviate. Now, in software development, this could mean two main things. If you're taking a more DevOps approach like Lika and the team, then the equivalent is running software. Continue serving as many users as possible and minimize any disruption. But you can also view aviate as keeping your system evolvable and debuggable. For example, how much effort is it to onboard a new team member, add features, or refactor? This would likely be the approach for pure development teams. But really, your team can sort of figure out what aviate means to you. So for us, running software, minimal user impact. Marta asks how many users are impacted. The average response times are still acceptable and the number of 500s is low. So as a first course of action, the team make a copy of and then delete the expanding log file. This will keep the application running and buy them some time. RJ keeps a close eye on the dashboard and will alert the team if anything changes. On to navigate. One of the queues is still increasing, a long way from the goal of near empty queues. One of the devs, Wills, volunteers to go through the copied log file. Meanwhile, Malcolm sets up a job to periodically delete the current log file from the problematic node. In the logs, Will notices that the application keeps throwing an exception. There's just an error processing one of the messages, and the listener just keeps, retrying. And on every retrial, it fails with the same exception. Now, this is a Java application, so what exception do you think it's throwing? Yes, null pointer. So Will communicates his findings with the team, and Marta writes them in the third column on the whiteboard. RJ yells out that the response times and 500s are still good. Malcolm says that with the current log file being periodically deleted, sufficient disk space is being maintained. So at this point, the improvement plan is clear to the team. Find and fix the null pointer exception, shut down all nodes of the application during a low use period, wait for the queue to clear, shovel the remaining messages into a temporary queue so that they can be expected, and restart the app. Implement a dead letter queue and reassess the retry policy. The last step, administrate, is to create tickets for the immediate fixes, add them to the sprint, and inform the customer. Improvements such as the implementation of the dead letter queue can be added to the backlog and refined. So in this talk, we followed Lika and the team through a number of situations that you might encounter in your role as a software professional. And in each situation, they leveraged a concept well known in another profession. So we saw RJ school Lika on opportunity cost when choosing between alternatives. Like it or not, there is an economic component to software development. We build things that are useful to others. Whether your customers are internal or external, there is an expectation that you provide the most value for a given amount of resources. It applies to open source as well. Opportunity cost helps us compare those costs and benefits and to choose accordingly. Consistency over perfection when looking to make improvements and form productive habits. By focusing on your habits rather than on the outcomes, you can start to invest in the process and find joy in it. Take small steps and check in regularly to see how far your team has come. Agile already provides some nice some nice tools for reflection, although a big favorite of mine are blameless and honest retrospectives. Putting relationships first to enhance learning and collaboration between teams. We can't claim to be a learning profession if there are no teachers. Put your relationships first and find ways to engage with and to teach each other. And we saw Martha apply the model aviate, navigate, communicate, administrate to deal with production issue with the team. But the model is not just limited to production issues, you can also use it as a framework to plan the evolution of your application. And in their alternate reality, Lika and the team could have avoided some pain had they been aware of the human tendency to escalate a commitment once a significant investment in time and resources had been made. So, back at the bar, the developer has just confirmed that yes, their office does have a ping pong table. And the Economist rolls their eyes and scoffs and goes, see? But that's hardly a reason to claim I have the easiest job, protests the developer. Things are starting to get heated now, but just before it becomes an all-out brawl, someone walks in that shuts them all up. It's none other than Sir Patrick Stewart. And despite their differences, one thing the Economist teacher and developer all have in common is that they are mad Trekkies. And quickly, for those of you who don't know, Patrick Stewart is most well known for his role as Jean-Luc Picard in Star Trek, followed closely by being the bald guy in these memes. And so, astonished, and with zero shame after a few beers, the developer asked Sir Patrick for some advice. So here are 5 things that we could learn from Patrick Stewart in Patrick Stewart's own words. Be aware of your limitations, but don't take yourself too seriously. I don't do impersonations. I can do a wounded elephant, I can do a really good cow, and I do a variety of sheep, all of which I would be happy to roll out for you. Have an outlet. The only still centre of my life is Macbeth. To go back to doing this bloody, crazed, insane mass murderer is a huge relief after trying to get my cell phone replaced. Keep your balance. It still frightens me a little bit to think that so much of my life was devoted to Star Trek and almost nothing else. The unconventional path might be the perfect path for you. One day, out of irritation, I said, all of these years with the Royal Shakespeare Company was nothing but a preparation for sitting in the captain's chair of the Enterprise. And lastly, be fearless, be you. If someone says, give me one word of advice, I say be fearless, and to know without any shadow of a doubt what they have to give, who they are, is totally unique and not shared by anybody else, and to believe in that uniqueness. My name is Adele, and thanks so much for your time.